And we are live here to chat about like one specific show, like literally just one show, like not like all the television that we've been watching for the last 2 weeks. No, we are here to chat about Only Murders in the Building season 4. And also we'll save a little bit of time for like the usual woman of the week, what else we watched this week, etc., news, but like Only Murders in the Building season 4 is here. It's with us. 3 episodes are out. All three of us are here. I'm so excited. Kate, Carey, how have you been since we last chatted? What's going on? Do you have any news today?
I've been good, been super busy, but we did Dragon Con and that was a blast. And I do bring a little bit of news, so I am totally sane and I'm not counting down the minutes, seconds, moments, breaths till Vox Machina comes out because I'm a normal human being.
Right.
And then I'm also excited to announce for me and like one other person that All Creatures Great and Small had the season 4 premiere date has been announced for January 12th. So very excited about that.
It's so funny with All Creatures Great and Small. See, I haven't watched it, but you and others have recommended it. And for some reason, there's like a really high overlap between like really good, smart former Arrow fans and watching All Creatures Great and Small. Like, I'm not sure where that connection happened. Like, different time periods, different universes, different countries of production. Like, what is the reason? I don't know, but like 100% of the people that I know that I've seen, like even folks I don't like know, but I've just like seen chatter about it online that watch that are like former Arrow Elicity fans. I don't know why.
Mm-hmm. Taste.
You know what? That'll do it. Every time, twice on Sunday. Carey, what about you? You bring any news for us?
Yes, I am doing well. Here's fair warning: when you get to become 50, the check engine light in your life comes on. Make sure you pay attention to it, folks.
And
But
you're
yes, I do
still 10 to
bring.
15 years away from that particular age that you just described.
Yeah, sure. I bring news of to Earpers, my fellow Winona Earp fans, the little show that could, the show that was saved at least once or twice or maybe 20 different times by its
Mhm.
fandom, gets a television movie send off this Friday the 13th, which is an appropriate day for that show.
Yes, it is.
It will be streaming on Tubi. I am incredibly happy and looking forward to seeing and reuniting with um, my favorite group of wacky and wacko folks. So, One on the Earp Vengeance coming this Friday on Tubi. Make sure you check it out.
I'm so excited. I will definitely be checking it out ASAP. It's funny you mentioned that like this has been like the little fandom that saved its show like multiple times. It is still very present and has like such a cult following. As Kate mentioned, we were recently at Dragon Con, which is really large convention in the southeast, and the presence for that show was really like there. Like I saw cosplayers, I know like some of the other folks that like do panels with me and stuff like that were either cosplaying or chatting about it, or it was referenced to things like that. Is still a very present example of like kind of a quintessential moment in fandom culture, for lack of a better way to put it, in like the last decade. So very excited for their movie on Friday. Similarly, but not similarly, I also saw that approval was just given, or a site was just picked, or like some sort of forward movement has happened with the Community movie, which is also on that kind of 6 seasons in a movie train. I, at this point, have no idea what cast from the original Community show will still be involved in it. I'm sure someone has been keeping better track than I have been, but I am fully excited. I'm old, so I'm very excited for that show to take place, that movie to take place
I
for me.
I will add on the coattails of reboots and kind of just mention we've previously talked about how My Lady Jane was canceled before it really had time to bloom.
Yes.
And it is a show that, I mean, I've seen plenty of people call for a second season, a reboot, or bring back. But this is one that I've seen like tons and tons of outcry for, to the point of George R. R. Martin of Game of Thrones fame has actually made statements about saying that it's wrong, that it should have been canceled, and trying to advocate for it to be
Like
brought back.
big names,
Big
big
names, which
names.
is
It's
so
crazy.
funny.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well,
Fingers
fingers
crossed that maybe like HBO picks it up and then like it goes from great to even better because of the budget.
fingers crossed for you. I think there's still a little life left in it, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe more than a little life left in it. But there is certainly more to be done there. And it was developing, like it was snowballing a bit of a fandom as it was
Yeah.
airing. I can't speak to the numbers or the process for why these things get canceled. Once upon a time in a faraway land, I had a pretty good handle on what's going to get canceled and exactly why, depending on what network it was on, depending on the goals of that network, depending on the numbers. There's various things. Is the cast signing back on? Is the creative direction in line with what the network's trying to put out in the next season? Is the location and primary staff still available? Are the numbers good? What are the number trends? Are the numbers there for the audience that it's trying to get? And maybe about like 10 years ago, if you knew with some semblance of confidence those 4 or 5 things, you knew exactly which shows were going to get canceled or not get canceled. But it's kind of the wild, wild west now, or maybe I'm just old, and it's just not as simple anymore, especially if things are on atypical networks at atypical times, or if they're not following like the same streaming formula that most other shows are. So I'm sure there's people far smarter than I, algorithms, AI far smarter than I, that can just kind of predict these kind of things. But for me, it's something like My Lady Jane will come around and I'm like floored at the fact that it was canceled, but we'll see. Well, speaking of shows that are not canceled, not getting canceled, and are fully like straight up saving television right now, we have season 4 of Only Murders in the Building to talk about tonight. I'm so excited. 3 episodes have aired, and I think all 3 of us have watched a different number of episodes. I've watched all 3. Carey, you've watched 1. Kate, you've watched 1.
I've watched all 3.
You have watched all 3. And
Yes.
are we all 333 at this point?
Yes.
Okay,
I
I don't know
finished
why
like
I
Great.
thought we were like 1, 2, 3. Okay, so I
I
can't
finished
say
like 5 minutes
spoilers.
ago. I finished like 5 minutes ago.
Amazing.
Great.
Okay, perfect. I watched the latest one, the 3rd episode today as well, like while doing like 5 other things. So don't expect me to fully remember every single plot point. I'll be rewatching it again like tomorrow. But yeah, I'm current as well. So let's just dive right into it. And I was excited and nerding out about this a bit with the level of hyperfixation that in recent weeks I've only saved for the WNBA. So this is fun, fresh, and new for me again. So I scripted a couple questions, and I'm just going to kick us
Mhm.
off with the first one. So let's start with the backbone of season 4, the quintessential choices for season 4. We've got the location, which we've often talked about on here as being sort of this additional character, the plot, the murder, as in who is gone. What are your thoughts on the choices, the backbone of this season, season 4, as it's been set up for us so far?
I am really excited with that. I'm very pleased with how they opened everything. I think it's one of their strongest openings to date because of how well they worked with it. And we've previously talked about how if you don't justify why there's being murders every single year, it's going to feel weird and you have to acknowledge it. And they're doing a good job of acknowledging this is weird. This is why are we having murders every year, as well as kind of throwing a curveball of the setting is kind of twisted. We have spent a good amount of time in LA and getting out of the Arconia a little bit while still technically fitting the bill of murder in that building.
Yeah.
And so I think they've done a really great job of kind of playing with the rules that they've set up for themselves and it not feel like this might be a weird reference, a Once Upon a Time way of following it. If you remember that ABC show,
Yeah.
they would write themselves into a corner a lot of times and then they wouldn't be able to break it, so they would just pretend like they didn't exist. Whereas this, they've dealt really, really well with giving themselves rules of how this should work and handling it beautifully.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly agree with that. I like the way that they brought in LA and Hollywood to the show by taking the viewer there, and then obviously the narrative of the show bringing that back to New York. So I really, really like that. I will tell you what I tell you what I really appreciated from the beginning of the first episode was it did not start with them finding the body, right?
Hmm.
And so that was my expectation that you open the door and boom, and there it is, right? And
Right.
so it builds that sort of suspense. I see him looking there, he's going to find the body there,
Hmm.
or he's looking there and she's looking there, and so there was that sort of like cat and mouse sort of fun with it. But we know that what that realization happens, it sort of kickstarts the show. But I like the way that they played with that anticipation as opposed to just opening the episode based and bam, here it is. Because that by delaying that, obviously, it gave them an opportunity and reason to get to LA and Hollywood. Because obviously, you don't do that if you find the body in the first 5 seconds of the show. So I really like the way they played around with that.
Yeah, you're mentioning how they're kind of playing with this structure of what is a murder and what can be unknown, not just who killed her, but why. And also, maybe this is me tin hatting a bit, but is she actually dead? On account of we haven't actually been shown, unless you count the end scene of last season, we haven't quite literally been shown a dead body. We are just at this point strongly believing that this is Saz's dead body. Spoilers for those who haven't seen it and didn't put it together from the end of last season. So I think that's been really interesting. And by delaying it, like you said, they've also allowed this idea of the murder and the building to become intrinsically tied, not just because that's where the physical evidence is like forever there, but also because, you know, the setup, the shot through the window, looking at this other building, getting to know other neighbors. It's a very LA, but it still has the same feeling of like we're in this kind of fishbowl cocoon and it's still a whodunit, not because there's not billions of people in and around this city, but because it could only be the people in this building or sequence of buildings or, you know, whatever. And the new cast or returning cast of characters, they're still that same. There's this very unique kind of quirky tone that the show uses where even if a character has a wildly different personality or has a what, you know, there's this kind of quirky, odd melodrama to it that is very unique to this show, such that if you were to be just introduced a character in the absence of our main three trio, you would know they're from this show because of how they're written and how they act, even if it's like a wildly different personality. There's a DNA to this show that has really started to gel. So let's talk about the murder. We have Saz gone, but not only not forgotten, more present than ever due to hallucinations, question mark, whatever is going on in their heads. What do you think of the presence of our murder victim in this show?
You know, it's not something that it's not something that they have not done before. So in previous seasons, they have used this concept of you either get to hear the monologue of the dead party, or you see them as a manifestation of a guilty conscience, or you know this, that, and the other. And I think the interesting thing is with Saz, this is actually the first time that it's a character that's generally likable.
Yeah.
So there is a certain amount of reverence when talking to the manifestation
Mm-hmm.
versus in past where there is kind of a irritation that we're still seeing them, even though you know they're dead and they're trying to find the murderer.
Mm-hmm.
There is this level of, but you were not always the greatest person to be around. Saz could have like these moments of quirkiness and kind of stepping on Charles's toes, but you could still see there was a genuine affection there. And so it's a very interesting shift in that part of that formula. It's that one little difference that I think adds a bit of why it feels so much more poignant that we are hearing from this character,
Mm-hmm.
because of her connection with Charles and also what that means for Charles, both because he's going through this very complicated feeling of grief because of the situation, but also because he's not even sure if she was the target or if he was.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really great element too.
Yeah, the grief, the guilt, the history that predates season one.
Yeah.
And you raise an interesting point, and I'm going to take it a little bit of a negative direction, but stay with me. you've pointed out that previously our murder victims were kind of all in a place where it was like multiple people could have killed them because they had multiple enemies, or there were like multiple people that disliked them, to an
Mm-hmm.
extent, even the audience. And if you think of like Bunny, for example, throughout the season, we grow to empathize with her a bit more. She's not made to be a one dimensional good character by the end, but we're led to empathize and understand her a bit more. Do you
Mm-hmm.
think they would potentially do the opposite with Saz, where she was kind of a fan favorite? She's played by certainly a fan favorite actress as part of this. Are they going to darken her throughout this? Are we going to learn dirt on her? Is she going to become less likable or less forgivable as we explore her murder more?
I don't
That
know. I think
is
that'd be
a,
interesting.
go
Sorry,
ahead.
go. You carry it.
And I was going to say that's an incredibly interesting question, and you could say the same thing about will that happen to Charles, right? Because obviously it's like, well, was he the target or was Sass the target?
Mhm.
So that would make incredible sense for this season to play around with sort of the narrative devices that they've used before. So I think because again, someone was killed, and there has to be a sort of motive for that, and so. Yeah, I could see that happening. I think that would be an interesting direction for the show to go.
Yeah. It seems like a show that wouldn't shy away from it.
Yeah.
So, one of my other questions that I was kind of thinking through.
Before,
Oh, go
but
ahead.
no, what I was going to say to the second question that you asked about, and I think Kate had a really good point about obviously about Saz or if it was like mistakenly supposed to be Charles. This season being a murder victim that the audience cares about,
Yeah.
and 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 that sort of hit me when they had the conversation, I guess the psychosomatic conversation
Mhm.
on the bed when he was talking about how she basically has been the one to take care of him and that sort of thing. And
Mhm.
it was incredibly poignant and it was kind of emotional and I was not expecting that right away, but then I thought about it. I was like, it makes absolute sense. We're talking about a murder victim that we all sort of care about, and
Mhm.
that's when it hit, and that's when it sort of clicked. Yeah, that's different this season.
Yeah. And she doesn't have some sort of, as far as we know at this point, a dark past, a network of enemies. We're not in a we're never in a place where we're going to, as far as I expect this season, going to be in a room full of people that hate Saz, and we have to decide which one would kill her. It's, most people seem to like her, even if they had some sort of, quirks, or, if there was an annoyance or whatever, that's fine. She's been a very multidimensional character, but she's never been a character where we would have expected somebody to be trying to kill her. And we start the season with, these kind of lines that are tossed in of we need a murder, whatever. So was it her? We have good reason to believe she wasn't the target. And what's that going to do for Charles, carrying that guilt, that paranoia, that grief, all at the same time? This is a very emotionally complex and heavy season for him, and he's really jumped to the forefront, as well as the character of the building, because so far in the season we've seen him the most relegated to the building. He's the one who's least outside at this point. So we see him and the building, or him and these hallucinations, or psychosomatic dreams, as you said, whatever, interact with each other in a sense where he is still the lead in that scene. So what are your kind of, as everything has started to kind of split off, and we've seen the plot line of Mabel and the movie that's being made, and Charles and these hallucinations, and the return of his past lover who broke out of prison, question mark, and all of that sort of intertwining and carrying similar elements, but also fracturing everybody out into different places, both physically and emotionally. What are your thoughts on all of these sort of side threads, elements, and storylines this season? Do you have any favorites? Is anything not working for you?
Um, Mine kind of actually goes hand in hand with a like little idea that popped into my head while you were talking.
Mm-hmm.
So they're really good about kind of not like heavy-handedly using themes. So last year's theme was kind of more of the relationship between a mother and a child with the play and with everybody involved. Whereas this season, it's leaning more towards I guess the best way you can kind of describe all of it is respect of legacy. So you can
Mm-hmm.
look at like the trio and like the three, they each have this thing that they want to be recognized for.
Mm-hmm.
And that really plays into the dynamics that they have with their respective actors of those characters are, you
Mm-hmm.
know. But what I would also be interested to see if maybe they're playing into um people like as a fandom as we people who watch TV, we do experience a lot of times we look at somebody and we think we understand them because they're a character or whatever else, and there's a disconnect that a lot of people have a hard time making. And what if the uh, killer ends up actually being a fan of the podcast who was concerned that because they, were running out of reasons for somebody to die,
Yeah.
they decide that they are going to take it in their own hands and do this because we do know the DNA of this story. The suspects that they have listed right now are most likely not it.
Right.
Um, it's not going to be these are very interesting storylines. I'm excited to see where they go, where the tinsel leads. I've got thoughts
Mm-hmm.
about that. But that's kind of the formula of this. You're not really going to get to know until maybe episode 7 is when you're really going to have a couple really strong theories.
Yeah.
Um, so because they're more formulaic about the themes that they're exploring, I would be my biggest prediction at this point is that it has something to do with drawing a connection to legacy and people remembering you for who you are and being understood because of Oliver's desire to be seen for his successes, and Charles's desire to be kind of recognized because of his past success, and
Mm-hmm.
Mabel just wanting to be understood for who she is. And all of these are kind of very big talking points when you talk to people who are kind of in the limelight and have these different pressures. So I think it'd be an interesting twist for
Mm-hmm.
them to do it that way.
And legacy makes sense in the context of this being in LA, the
Yes.
story
They,
that's being written that could preserve them. You mentioned this idea of it being like a fan of the podcast, which makes sense. It could be that and perhaps somebody involved in the making of the movie doing this to
yes.
continue to drum up attention, continue to drum up press around them, drum up, hype and, a natural kind of tension around the movie being made as well, whether that be production, the alleged cast, any of that. If it's whoever needs the movie the most, might be a
Mhm.
potential murder.
Yeah.
Carrie, what are your thoughts?
Well, I like how obviously here we are in season 4, and I could very well be wrong, but it felt like season 1 was more of a focus on sort of the trio, the ensemble, the group sort of effort, and then obviously in season 2, it felt like obviously the focus was more on Oliver. No, I'm sorry, on Mabel.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually thinking about it now, season 1 it felt like it was a focus on Mabel, and then obviously Oliver had his sort of season. It felt like, and obviously it feels like this season is strongly focusing on Charles. So I do like the fact that we sort of get. Obviously, it's an incredible ensemble, but they sort of have a through line of a particular character that we sort of see this sort of mystery through, and are able to follow it that way. So I think um, that's a pretty cool narrative device. I have not yet sort of thought about who the killer might be, other than just jokingly thinking it. And I forget the dude's name, but it's the guy who owns the cadaver dog, and was it Tammy Faye Bacon, I
Oh
believe
yeah,
is
yeah,
what he named it at the end. I could easily see it being him, but it just possibly can't be. Um, and so, what I really sort of like about this show and how they do it is that it's easy to come into sort of a mystery show and always think about solving the mystery,
yeah.
solving the mystery, solving the mystery, looking for clues everywhere. And I'm pretty sure that there are people who watch the show sort of doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But I always get lost in the relationships
Mm-hmm.
between the characters. and the side characters and that sort of thing. So it's like we obviously want the mystery to be solved, but my whole thing is I'm here for the ride, and obviously we're going to get to solving the mystery, but that's not the reason that I'm here. So I
Mhm.
think it's a little bit of I think it's a little bit of narrative thread for everyone, but I'm just here because they do the show so well. They tell really good stories, and people are so comfortable in the roles that they play. So it's just fun. So that's what I'm digging most about the start of this season.
To your point, then, so setting kind of the mystery aside, are there any, is there a character growth storyline? Is there something we're being, it's only been 3 episodes, but is there something you think might be being set up in terms of character development, character interactions, either with our old familiar characters or some of the new folks that we're seeing more this season that has really caught your attention that you think is going to be like a highlight in season 4 for you?
Well, I will tell you this, and it's something I haven't stopped thinking about since sort of like it happened, right? And so it's Mabel's character, right? And she feels like the character the most that needs to have whatever this season is going to be about sort of work and set a solid foundation for herself because she's still sort of wandering and hasn't found her footing, hasn't found her place. And so when she was talking to the producer about what she absolutely needed to basically sign away her life rights, which sounds devastating to be quite honest, it's like, what does that really mean in Hollywood, right? So I'm really, really, really intrigued by what it was that she was willing to accept to sign that away. And so that's why I'm intrigued to see what what she does this season in terms of where she lands. Is it in a place of a solid foundation or does she continue to drift? So that's a storyline that I'm really interested in seeing where it goes.
Yeah, she's really in a place where she's being forced to define herself by being forced to by being forced to define the fictionalized version of herself, the Eva Longoria version of herself, Ma Belle, or however they were, most recently pronouncing it. How does she want other people to see her? And it's interesting because since season 1, we have seen her struggle with identity in who is she as an adult. Because when we're first introduced to her, she's a very like new adult. Who is she in relationships? Who is she as a friend? Who is she, um, you know, just as a person in terms of morals and ethics? There's seasons where we have wondered, was she the killer? And I'm not opposed to that potentially being the answer. Yes, at some point, one of these days. And this time, it's for her, and I guess to an extent for the others, it's how do you want to be known, even if that's not necessarily who you are. And I found that interesting. She's saying not just her self being polished and Hollywoodified, but she's also seeing like additional vices added. In what way is she too good, too bad, boring, too old, too young, whatever. And that's been a fun little face off, her versus herself.
Yeah. Well, and to kind of build on that, I think that's one of the most interesting things about how they've done the actors playing these characters bit, is it's their response and relationship with the Eva Longoria and Zach Galifianakis and Eugene Levy.
Mm-hmm.
It's so interesting because Oliver has consistently been the character that wants to be seen the most. He wants this podcast. He wants everything he does to generate a professional success. And he is interacting with the character who is least impressed by him,
Mm-hmm.
who is he has his own resentment, and it's such an interesting way of really really highlighting that. Whereas, and then Eugene Levy being the most impressed by Charles, only for him to really realize he doesn't know Charles at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other one is, the Eva Longoria, who kind of plays it. I mean, there's a lot of moments for her, she plays it as if she doesn't know Mabel at all, but in
Mm-hmm.
these little quiet moments, it's very clear that she knows Mabel very well,
Uh-huh.
and that she's pushing Mabel a ton. And I think that's such an interesting way of playing this dynamic, that it's giving these characters just a little bit, but then taking it away in such a harsh way
Mhm.
that it's really bringing out a lot of the tropes we already knew about these characters, but almost shining it back in their face in a way that they've never had to deal with before. And
Mhm.
so I'm really excited to see how that part of this whole thing develops.
Yes. I, it's a nice element of self-awareness of the show, even when our
Yeah.
characters are not self-aware. And the show brings in so much star power. Meryl Streep, of course, but and everything else is below that, but still very good. Uh,
Yeah.
this show just is able to pull from some deep talent in order to play with things that in the hands of a less stacked cast could go a little kooky or hokey. The idea of, oh, this is the person that's playing you. If it wasn't these three, it may not go this way. But as Kate, as you're highlighting, you've got those of like, oh, he can imitate Steve Martin on the surface, but he doesn't know the character underneath, or
Yeah.
Charles. Whereas Eva Longoria has none of the surface of Mabel, but actually does seem to kind of know her underneath. It is fascinating. It sets me up for my question of what do you want to see next? So we are 3 episodes into the season that I think is it 8 episodes, 10 episodes long, 8.
8.
8. So we're about a third of the way, give or take, through the season as we enter the middle kind of meaty part of the season. Because the next time we'll be chatting about the show will be in 2 weeks. So we'll have the middle under our belt, and we'll be entering kind of the final. But as we enter the middle part of this season, what is it you hope to see? Like, what are you looking forward to in the next 2 to 3 episodes?
I mean, I'm excited to see the characters interact with the actors. I'm also really excited to see there, because there's the DNA of the show and you start to pick up on what they're going to do. The the metal from the implants being placed there, it's going to lead us on a wild goose chase, I'm
Mhm.
sure, and I'm very excited about that one particularly.
Mhm.
um it's, the more and more they drop really specific references, so like the ham coming up in very different ways every time, and the metal implants and a couple other small details. I'm excited to see how they send us in a goofy goose chase that's actually going to lead into some really great character moments, and
Mhm.
it be very much like, we kind of put this little detail right here and you're paying attention to everything else, and so you missed this, which is a really great thing about what they've done every season. And it's one of my favorite bits is that they give you all of the information like a lot of other mystery shows like this do,
Mhm.
but it, like we were kind of talking about, that's not their main concern with the show. It's more about the development of the character relationships and the literary devices.
Mhm.
So I am really looking forward to how they're going to use the goofy parts to do some really, really big things.
Yeah, I I agree, and you're kind of highlighting an interesting difference between what you focus on and what Carrie focuses on. Where for you, I think like pretty much every season, you've come on at some point and you've been like, I know who the murderer is. I've solved it, and it's like we're episodes away from the finale, and you're like always right. But for you, there's a lot of like, how did they set up the murder? How did they execute it? Who did it?
Hmm.
It's that. Whereas Carrie, as you were mentioning earlier, for you, this show is about these extremely unique relationship dynamics that we get to see here. Not only are they very well done, they're unique. A lot of the dynamic that we see with Charles. Why am I blanking on his name? And Mabel.
Oliver.
Oliver. I keep wanting to call Martin the actor's name. The dynamic we see with them, as well as the dynamic that we saw with like Charles and Saz, the dynamic that we see, we've seen with Mabel and her friends previously, et cetera. Like there's not a lot of these specific types of relationships on TV, and so that's what makes this unique. Um, and it's interesting to hear how like different things will appeal to different
Mhm.
viewers, but then by the end, we are kind of all excited about the same thing, like a scene that you both would potentially list as a favorite. One, because so for example, the characters meeting the actors who will be playing them, one of you will like it because it's dropping clues as to the plot and what's important and could this producer be the murderer, whatever. The other will be enjoying it because we're getting some insight into our main trio. I don't know, it's just really,
Yeah.
I love this show. It's saving television. In this essay, I will, just kidding. Carrie, what are you
Yeah.
looking forward to in the meaty part of the season, the middle, the sandwich filling?
It's kind of simple for me. I am looking forward to see um, Charles tap in, right? Because that was obviously the message that Zaz left for him, and that was obviously sort of the connection that the two of them had, was that obviously Zaz would tap in for him when it was time for him to freeze, and it was time for her to do the action scenes. So it's an opportunity for him to sort of step into a situation that's obviously personal and emotional to him. And I think we've always felt like the trio was keenly interested in solving a murder.
Mhm.
And some of them have obviously been personal to them, but I'm really interested in going on this journey with Charles um, to sort of delve more into the relationship and the connection that he had with her, and obviously why that will so keenly and intently drive him to get this solved. And more than anything, what one thing that I've always sort of joked about this show about is it's a show about murder, but they've often taken sort of plot points and set pieces and sort of taken the sort of the scary element or the menacing element out of it. And the truth of the matter is, there is a murderer in
Mhm.
or around this building. And I do like the fact that we saw through Charles when he was sort of petrified and afraid to go out of the building, there was a palpable sense of what we're dealing with here. And so I appreciate that they they made a point to include that element in a show that can be incredibly funny, can be incredibly irreverent, but at the end of the day, we are talking about a murderer, and how dangerous that can be. So I'm interested to see in the next few episodes where they take that, and particularly how Charles runs with that.
Yeah, I think it's probably easy with the LA setting in particular to start to see everything as fiction, to start to see everything as part of the movie or tangential to the movie or part of a movie. And so that reminder of, oh, these are murders, people have died. And, since we've talked a lot tonight about the fact that this is probably the murder that has most emotional connection. Um, Second only or tied only potentially with season one. We saw emotional ties there too. Those were just more on Mabel's end, and we didn't know her as well. Whereas with Charles and Saz, that's inherently a longer tie and probably more emotional tie. But you could probably draw some parallels between season one and season four. And I think that's why we've all kind of agreed that season four is off to an incredible start, fingers crossed, but a really good start where we're getting the humor, we're getting the setting, but we're also getting like the emotional impact. And that's kind of what I hope to see continue as well. I hope to see a lot of that sort of inherent DNA and tone of the show that makes it so recognizable, even when it is technically in a different city or technically in a different um, building. I know we're running short on time, but I do want to get to our Woman of the Week. Theoretically, we have watched other things this week. Nobody wants to hear me talk about Selling Sunset. We're just going to dive right into Woman of the Week. And for that, I will let Kate kick us off.
See, I did watch other things this week, but they don't have anything for me to actually bring forth because they were Indiana Jones movies, and we won't get into why
Can I
those
interrupt
don't
for a
really.
second? Kate sounds like a robot to me. Does she sound like a robot to you, Carrie?
It sounds like a robotic chipmunk.
It's like it is robotic chip. Like I can technically tell what you're saying. Like this will be a really interesting Woman of the Week pitch. I do want you to know you do sound like a robotic chipmunk while speaking.
Okay, is it better now, or is it
Not even a little bit. Exactly the
okay?
same.
Great. Okay, well, there's nothing I can do to fix it. So, robotic chipmunk, here we go.
Okay.
Um, I actually don't really have a fun woman of the week. I tried to think of somebody in real world. So I'm just going to kind of mention the Eva Longoria Mabel of it, which was kind of my favorite part of the first three episodes. We talked about you kind of compared how I tend to be a character driven person when I watch shows, but mysteries do bring out the attention to detail in me. And I think there's something about the Mabel arc that's really kind of hitting both, because it's once more highlighting how much Mabel is. It's really bad. Did you laugh? Uh, Mabel is the quote unquote straight man of the group, and she is the most likely to actually solve the murder. And so it's so interesting how they're playing off each other as her being Eva Longoria being the most unhinged of the three actors and doing some of the most chaotic actions. So I think that their duo is some of my favorite stuff I've watched this week, and because of that, it's really kind of interesting in that regard. And that's all I got.
Kate's chipmunk voice modulator was a paid actress. Carrie, do you want to go next, or would you like me to go next?
I'll go next. Mine is simple and sweet, and it won't take up a great deal of time. My woman of the week is Sasha Collier, who, thanks to the disappointing Flash movie, through no fault of her own, through no actions of her own, basically bombed and doomed a bunch of people's careers and that sort of thing. But she was a highlight of that movie. She is doing press in at the Toronto International Film Festival, if I'm not mistaken, has a movie that's coming out. It's probably streaming somewhere that you can find it. But what I absolutely appreciate and why she's my woman of the week is because no matter how that movie did, she got to add to the legacy of the Supergirl character. And while doing press, she had an opportunity and she took it to basically wish Millie Alcock the absolute best, playing Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, in the upcoming DC movie. So it's just awesome and fantastic that she gets to add her name and become part of the Supergirl legacy and continue the trend of passing the baton to folks to take the character further and higher. And I can only hope that James Gunn or whoever has the ability to cast folks in fantastic mainstream movies that people will see and love, take an opportunity to cast her again because I think she deserves and needs another opportunity. So that's why she is my woman of the week.
That's sweet. I love to see women supporting other women that are like in very similar roles. In this case, a resurgence of a particular role. And shout out to Millie Alcott as well. I first thing I saw her in was House of the Dragon, and she did an incredible job. And I'm sure she'll do wonderful work with this role as well. My woman of the week is one I'm sure I've picked before, and it's not surprising. It's Taylor Swift. This is we are live on the evening of September 11th, and she made a very lovely post about her cat yesterday, which also happened to be a political post as well. It was articulate, it was well timed, it was sweet, it was non-judgmental, it was direct, and I just think that we've talked a lot on here, not a lot, but we've made passing comments on here of like, don't get your political news from celebrities. Don't look to celebrities for your information on politics or feminism or really any important whatever. Like, Taylor Swift is completely allowed to like just make good albums and not also like use her platform to like speak on politics. And she still chose in a very reasonable and kind way to use her platform to talk about important current political stuff. And I thought she did a great job. Really, really nailed it. Her cat looked great. 100 out of 10. So, woman of the week right there. Oh,
I do have one bonus question if you've got a moment for it.
I sure do.
Based on this season of Only Murders in the Building, the question I have for both of you is this. If someone were making a movie about your life, who's going to be
Oh,
the Hollywood actress that plays you?
Ooh, that's a good one. That's a great one.
Well, I don't know. I've always said that Katie McGrath actually looks a lot like Cammie.
Really? Oh, that's the nicest thing anybody's ever told me. See, she's got like green eyes and I've got brown eyes. Like I don't have that like air of like pleasantly killing people that she has, but wow, what an honor. I've often said that Maud Apatow, is that her name? Looks like you.
I think so. You've told me about 20 people. So,
You've got that kind of like you've got a very like you've got a face where you look like a bunch of different celebrities, and also Caitlin Clark.
okay.
But Maud Apatow, and she's also like I think similar to your age ish enough to where it'd be like a good choice.
Yeah.
In terms of somebody who used to look a little bit more like me, she like with age, she has looked a little less like me. Isabel Furman, who played Esther, the orphan in the horror movies, The Orphan. Um, her as a child and me as a child, her as a teenager and me as a teenager, pretty identical, including all of the kind of like, there's something kind of off putting and they look like they might kill me. We both have kind of that vibe. But as an adult, she looks a little bit different than me now. I will happily take Katie McGrath. Have not earned that one, but
The
like,
other, I mean, and then the other one that always comes to my mind, although because I've met your sister, she looks even more like your sister, is the actress that plays Yennefer.
yeah, okay, another high praise, but I will take that.
Both of those are, to me, both of those are characters who give off villainous presence, but actually can have really good, warm-hearted characters, which is kind of the character description you always give yourself.
I
So I
so
think that that'd be perfect.
I'm gonna ride this high for like the rest of the week. Wow. Carrie, who would play you?
Oh, my stock answer to this question is always Halle Berry. I think she could absolutely positively capture my essence, and more importantly, she would need to do a deep dive into my character, what makes me tick, and I would look forward absolutely to that one-on-one time. My
Oh yeah.
stock answer, Halle
Yeah.
Berry, every time, every time.
Okay, you saying that has opened up like an entire like rom-com movie idea, like an actor who's going to like play a particular actor or an actress who's going to play a particular whatever the situation is. They're like doing like a life study of them and they're following them around, but then they like fall in love. That'd be so cute. And like
Yeah.
like I love your setup for it, but most likely it would be gay because it would most likely be like either a woman following a woman around or a man following a man around, and we need more gay rom coms.
I
But
love
Halle
that our
Berry
brains
playing you
work
would
the
also be.
same way. Our brains work the exact same way on that one because he wasn't even done explaining that. And I was like, that sounds like a rom com.
It literally does. Halle Berry falls in love with you. Done. The end. Happily ever
Make it happen. Make it happen, Hollywood.
All right. Well, if anybody's watching this live, let us know who would play you in a Hollywood remake of your life in the chat down below. You can find Carrie and Kate's information as well in the information down below. Have a wonderful Wednesday. Bye.